This was my inspiration room for the message which I started to put together on Friday morning, Buzz Beans Coffee. I thought you should see a picture. These are the two gentlemen that were playing Sheep's Head, which, isn't that a Wisconsin game? Yes, it is. Thank you. I lived in the land of cheeseheads. So one of the gentlemen was from Wisconsin, so it was a really nice conversation. And I did ask them a little bit about change, because that's obviously what this reading is about. It's what the contemporary reading is about. It's what the passage from Isaiah was about. And I find in my life, I like stability. I like things to be predictable. I like things to be under control. It may not appear that way, but that's kind of what I like under the surface. And we are all creatures of habit, correct? Ultimately, and I really include myself in this because as I've really become a little bit more self-realized, I've also realized that I may say I like change, but I'm not too big a fan of change. There's a individual who followed up Socrates, kind of in the Greek philosophy and culture, that said, change is the only constant in life. We've heard that, right? Change is the only constant in life. And of course, he said that to highlight the need for all of us to always plan and to be ready for change in pretty much every aspect of our lives. So today we welcome Susan. And as I wrote in, I believe it was last month's newsletter, that Susan and Maddie, her daughter, will change us. We will also change Susan and Maddie. And Susan, your prophetic voice, whatever it becomes, will comfort us, but hopefully will also challenge us and change us. And being the control freak that I am, I will attempt to manage the change. And I might lose my mind attempting to do that. But I think anybody who's ever tried to control the events and circumstances of their life can tell you that it's a prescription for insanity. I love this quote. Change is not popular, by Robin Williams. We are creatures of habit as human beings. I want it to be the way it was. But if you continue the way it was, there will be no is. So one of the ways I think that we all deal with the changes in life is we want to look back to the time when everything was good, or at least we perceived it was good. We want to look at the past, and oftentimes we see the past, I think, through rose-colored glasses. And as a pastor in the role of attempting to be a prophetic voice, my call is challenging people to change, to turn from defeat into hope, to turn sadness into dancing, to turn hatred into love, to turn sadness into acceptance, to turn grudges into letting go. You get the point. It's about a changing and growing faith. We can also get stuck in the past when it comes to this thing we call faith. Like somebody said out loud this morning, have faith, that they still haven't changed. Have faith that indeed that's going to change in the water. Some have told me recently it was much easier to have faith before 45. It was easier to have faith when America was a Christian nation, which, by the way, we never were a Christian nation. First Church is almost 101 years old. We're planning and setting the stage for our next 100 years. We've made some bold decisions the last 2 years. We've called Pastor Susan, we hired Jerry, and now we've hired Ellie to focus on outreach and marketing. Are we filled with faith? Is that a step of faith? Or is that possibly our last-ditch effort? Or are we just foolish? I found this image on a church website this past week, and I think after asking that question, I thought this was important. Are we really fools? Church members eating grass, following instruction from their pastor. So don't listen too closely to what I say. The question I have, and that we've been discussing, is do we have what it takes to draw the nuns, and I'm not talking N-U-N-S, I'm talking N-O-N-E-S, the people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious. How do we make places for them with our bludgeoning condo and apartment dwellings happening right around the church? And are we going to do church differently to draw those people? Are we going to have different experiences so that they can be a part of this beloved community outside of our Sunday morning worship? We all have our memories, I do too, when I was a teenager, when our churches were full of worshipers. And there was a time when this particular church had a couple of services, and it was kind of the place to be. It was where all the movers and shakers went, at least I've been told. Back in the day when people went to church almost every Sunday, and honor those of you who do, now we are lucky if the committed parishioners or committed members show up once a month. Back in the 50s and 60s, I'm told, we had a church choir that was over 30 people, and they wore magenta and white robes. And boy, when they sang the Hallelujah chorus on Easter, it would rock the rafters. Now we have a different reputation as a community of faith. We have a reputation as, oh, you belong to that church that does all that great work outside its doors. But this morning I'd like you to consider this, as I think we're on the cusp of a new thing in our community again. It was easier to have faith when, fill in the blank. It was easier to have faith when. What are some of your answers? When you had plenty of money? When somebody made all your decisions for you?
I was a child.
When you were a child? The lines were defined. What's that? Oh, when you thought you could see the future, Kelly. Oh. When you thought this country was moving toward equality. Before life slaps you in the face. Ooh. What's that? When life slaps you in the face. Thank you, Arnie. There's less of you, there's more of God. We didn't ask for answers yet. It was easier when you knew who God was. And you had a box for God. When your kids weren't suffering?
When I had no fear.
When you had no fear.
And I was married and with my children.
And you were married and with your children. When we had a good president. We do have Trump supporters here, so yes. And when we had a good pastor. So I think, we could all fill in the blank because, it's the honest truth that we look back and we say, it was easier to have faith, it was easier to live, life was easier when. And I've come to realize that I filled in the blank with all sorts of things throughout my life. And to be honest, right now, life is better than it's been. But I don't think my faith is necessarily stronger because I'm struggling with some of the same issues that you are. Good old days. Those days are gone. The past is the past. The mainline Christian church in America is really, really, really on the decline. And by the way, the mega big box churches are also on the decline. I do ask why, but most importantly, I ask, so if that's the case, what is God doing? What is God doing? What new thing is God doing? I believe, and it was amazing to hear since Susan's been here a few days, her perception of the way we can do things new and different outside our doors. But in my humble opinion, it's really about being authentic inside the doors. It's about building true, authentic, messy church. Right now, our world is full of alternative facts, and it's full of alternative truths. I think we need people to say what they mean and mean what they say. We need some genuine authenticity, and I think that genuine authenticity really needs to come from the progressive church movement right now. We need to acknowledge that we are fully divine, but we are fully human, that we are fully amazing and we are fully flawed. And church and humanity is really rough and messy around the edges. Are we having a hard time really bringing our faith into the present time with all of its challenges? For myself, all I really have is this right now faith. Faith in God, faith in humanity for me is faltering. And I say, accept what is, let go of what was, and have faith in what will be. Susan, you and I both moved here not knowing a single soul. Why? Seriously, it seems quite preposterous. I walked back from the soundproof room after the vote was taken almost 4 years ago, maybe more than 4 years ago, and it was an almost 100% yes, and people stood to their feet and they applauded, and I seriously felt my heart in my throat. And I said to myself, what did I just do? I am moving across the country from the land of 10,000 lakes to the desert. Was that faith? Was I hoping to find something new and something different? Or was it stupidity? Did I really want my life to change that much? I really had a good thing going at Living Table United Church of Christ back in Minneapolis. January 1st, though, the snow up to my windowsills at my home in Minneapolis. I arrived 3 days later after a long road trip, and it was 75 degrees and sunny. Did I look back with regret a number of times after arriving here? You bet. I was what First Church thought they wanted, but I think I was a little bit too much for some people. For some, I was possibly too progressive. For some, I was not progressive enough. Did I want to go back to Egypt like the children of Israel, as we read in Isaiah? You bet I did. For 2 years, I struggled with, did I hear the right voice? Was this the change I needed personally, and was this the change that First Church needed? And I'm assuming, Pastor Susan, you're going to have the same questions. And I kept reading, and I kept meditating. I kept reading this one particular passage and that chapter from Isaiah. And I kept meditating on those words, and I asked, so God, are these words for me? Are these words for us? Be alert. Be present. I'm about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I'm making a road through the desert, rivers in the Badlands. And then one day, about 2 years into my call here, I walked into the chapel at the Redemptorist Center, and this is the chapel in Tucson, Our Lady of the Desert, it's called. My eye was immediately drawn to the left side of the altar, and you can't read it, but I read this, and I literally fell on my knees and started to cry. And I realized this is why I am here. And it said this: the desert will lead you to your heart, where I will speak to you. God had been speaking to my heart all along. I just wasn't really tuned in. I've become much more in touch with my heart since moving to Phoenix. And in many ways, I hear a much clearer voice of the divine speaking to that more open heart. That's exactly where we find the Israelites in this narrative today. God was attempting to lead them back to their hearts. Back to their hearts so they could hear the voice of God. They could experience that good old faith that they used to have. They were looking for God, the God they used to have, the faith they used to have, the good old days. You know, memories can too often get in the way of the new thing that God is doing. The Hebrew people, They were more likely on their way back from exile in Babylon in the story, and this was a long and a dangerous and a desolate journey like our own desert here. Imagine wandering through the wilds of our desert, not in Phoenix, but we're talking way out, up toward Anthem, or further. We so romanticize the wilderness. We romanticize us getting out into the wilderness. For the Hebrew people, though, without the resources we have, the wilderness was really a place to be feared. It was a place of unknown dangers, and it was a place of death. Similar to our own desert, similar to those who climb, Jane, you know this, you live close to Camelback Mountain, to those that we rescue from the mountain because they took on more than they could handle. The same God who made a way in the sea and opened the sea for them that they could cross over to safety promised now to do another new thing in their lives, to make a way in the wilderness, to bring water and resources into the wilderness. God was promising once more to bring them safely through this dangerous, perilous journey. So I encourage you to bring faith forward. I love this picture of the water over the road in the desert. Make faith relevant. Make it apply, no matter how hopeless or desperate our situation may seem. The Israelites, the Hebrew people, were told that God is there. That's the bottom line. But I think that's one of the most difficult lessons to learn. For most of us, we look back and we see God at work, but when it comes to trusting God to do something new in our present circumstances, that's a really different matter. I've always believed that God is the God of right now. God is a God of right now, right here in this present moment. Priscilla Shirer is an American author, a motivational speaker and actress, a Christian evangelist. She wears a lot of titles. And I recently leafed through her book, written in 2001, and it's called Life Interrupted, Navigating the Unexpected. And I love what she has to say. God is the God of the right now. She doesn't want you sitting around regretting yesterday, nor does he want you wringing your hands and worrying about the future. She wants you focusing on what she is saying to you and putting in front of you right now. I told the leadership and the staff a few weeks ago that about every 4 years I get an itch. I don't feel challenged and I feel bored. But here in this time and in this place, here on our somewhat unkept corner of 2nd Street in Willetta, I am not feeling that itch. I'm not feeling that itch, and I'm excited to see the new thing that God will be doing. And Susan and myself, the entire staff, we need you as beloved community to be on the same page, and I believe you are. Kind of all waiting on spirit tiptoes, open, pregnant with the next thing that God may do among us. Be alert. Be present. I'm about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? I'm making a road through the desert and rivers in the Badlands. Right now, at least in this moment, I believe I have faith, and these still have not changed. But I do have faith that eventually we'll get there. That we have some of the most brilliant people on our ministry staff and in leadership here in this community to move us forward. I am convinced of that. And some of the most brilliant and amazing people in the pews. And I hope and pray and I trust that together we can catch the vision of Isaiah. Don't we see it? This new thing that God is doing. We live in wilderness, we live in the desert, and right now it is hot and incredibly dusty. It is unrelenting, and it's unchanging, and it's harsh. That's kind of how life gets. Let's not do the same thing over and over again expecting different results, because what's that called? Insanity. The God of Isaiah pipes to a different tune. The God of Isaiah is really the God, fast forward to Easter, that calls us to a different dance. But if we are to sing anew and dance afresh, we must remember sometimes to forget. We must expect the new work of God to be alert for the new thing brought about by Spirit. This rich and incredibly deep passage from Isaiah really pleads with us, I think, as a spiritual community to see beyond that which is obvious. Not only in our community, but in our world, to see what God potentially will be recreating among us. And faith is restored as we begin to look at things differently. Faith is restored as we see beyond that which is obvious. Faith is restored as we see beyond what we as humans have been programmed to see. So, this looks a little fiery, but that's intentional. Get your fire back. It's not over until God says it's over. Start believing again, start dreaming again, start pursuing what God has put and laid upon our hearts. And so my very final thought for you today, for me today, is this. Hafiz says, this place where you are right now, God's circle on a map for you. Isn't that incredibly reassuring? Where you are right now, God has circled on a map for you. Pastor Susan, that's for you. That's for me. That's for each and every one of us sitting in these pews today. For this moment, for this time, we are together as beloved community, and we wait on tiptoes, spiritual tiptoes, expecting from God not just the same old, but a new thing. So let us pray. Oh, good and ever challenging, ever merciful, ever loving, ever comforting God. You have been with us in the past 101 years. You will be with us for the next century. You are giving us amazing, brilliant, beautiful, intelligent, strong, diverse people in the pews. And you are giving us the same as we continue to build our staff. Strengthen us and allow us to be your voice in the desert wilderness, proclaiming love and mercy. And that you are the God of new things, that you are the God who calls us forward and not necessarily backward, but allow us now to be in this moment and this place together. And the people of God said, amen.